After 70, these 4 kind family phrases might actually be manipulation. Many of us are familiar with the phrases that older family members often say out of love and care. They're gentle, reassuring, and intended to keep the peace or offer support. However, what if I told you that some of these phrases, while seeming harmless, could actually be a form of manipulation? It's not uncommon for individuals, especially older family members, to use certain words or phrases to subtly influence others. They may seem kind or thoughtful, but their true intent can be more about controlling or guiding decisions in a way that suits their needs. This can be difficult to recognize, especially when we have a natural tendency to respect and care for our elders. One of the most common phrases we often hear from older family members is, "I'm just worried about you." At first glance, this seems like a genuine, caring expression, right? It's the kind of thing that makes you feel loved, like someone genuinely has your best interests at heart. Who wouldn't appreciate someone voicing concern for their well-being? But what happens when this phrase is repeated time and time again, especially in situations where it's clear that the person saying it is not truly in a position to make decisions for you? It might be helpful to step back and ask, is this phrase really about concern, or is it subtly trying to manipulate you into doing what they want? Let me give you an example. Imagine a scenario where a mother constantly tells her adult child, "I'm just worried about you," every time they decide to make a big life change. Maybe it's about moving to a new city for a job opportunity, or it's about making a personal choice that diverges from what the mother would have preferred. On the surface, it might sound like genuine concern for their child's well-being. But when it becomes a recurring theme, it can start to create a sense of unease in the person hearing it. Every time the child is about to make a decision that goes against the mother's wishes, the worry gets expressed in this way, creating an emotional pressure that makes the child second-guess themselves. It's not that the mother is intentionally being controlling or malicious. In many cases, it's simply a reflection of her own insecurities or fears, perhaps about losing her child to independence. But the impact is still real. Research supports this notion, suggesting that guilt tripping, like the kind embedded in phrases such as "I'm just worried about you," is a tool often used by people who feel a lack of control in their own lives. The person who uses this phrase might not even realize they're doing it. They are not necessarily trying to control, but rather attempting to regain a sense of power and influence over the choices that their loved one makes. Now, let's consider how this affects the person on the receiving end. Instead of feeling empowered to make decisions on their own, they might feel pressured to seek constant approval. Each time the phrase is used, it creates a little crack in their self-confidence, making them wonder if their decisions are wrong or if they're being reckless. And the more this phrase is repeated, the stronger that pressure becomes, until the person feels like they cannot make a move without running it by the person who is worried about them. The effect is insidious. What starts as concern slowly turns into a tool for emotional manipulation, shifting the balance of power in the relationship. The phrase "I just want you to be happy" is another one that may sound completely innocent at first. After all, who wouldn't want someone to want their happiness? It feels warm and comforting, doesn't it? It suggests that the person speaking cares deeply for your well-being and wants nothing more than for you to feel fulfilled. But when used repeatedly, especially in certain contexts, this phrase can actually become a tool of manipulation, subtly shaping the way a person makes decisions and views their own happiness. Let's explore how this might play out in a family dynamic. Imagine a scenario where an elderly father repeatedly tells his adult daughter, "I just want you to be happy," whenever she's facing a big life decision, whether it's about her career, relationship, or personal goals. Initially, it seems like a sweet sentiment, an invitation for her to consider her happiness. But over time, this well-meaning phrase can become an emotional burden. The problem arises because, while the father says he wants her happiness, what he really means is that he wants her to make decisions that align with his own vision of happiness for her. It's not about letting her choose what truly makes her happy, but about steering her toward a version of happiness that suits his preferences. For example, if the daughter wants to pursue a career path that her father doesn't approve of, he might drop the phrase "I just want you to be happy" in an attempt to influence her to choose something more traditional or more in line with his values. The underlying message is clear: your happiness, as I see it, doesn't align with your choices. The phrase subtly places pressure on the daughter to act in a way that satisfies the father's expectations, even if it doesn't align with her own dreams and desires. This can create a scenario where the daughter feels trapped, unable to make decisions freely without considering what will make her father happy, not because she truly believes it will make her happy. Studies show that individuals who regularly hear phrases like this, particularly from older family members, often experience increased stress levels due to the perceived pressure to please others. The constant reminder that someone else's happiness is tied to their choices can create a sense of obligation, leading to anxiety and a diminished sense of autonomy. Over time, the daughter may begin to question her own desires, placing the wants of others above her own. This creates an unhealthy dynamic where her happiness becomes a reflection of someone else's values, leaving her feeling disconnected from her own sense of fulfillment. In the long run, this can breed resentment as she struggles to make choices that reflect her own happiness rather than the expectations placed on her. The phrase, while seemingly kind, creates a narrow definition of happiness that ultimately undermines a person's ability to make decisions freely. Another phrase that might seem innocent but can actually be manipulative is "you don't have to do anything for me." At first, this sounds like a kind and selfless sentiment. Who wouldn't appreciate someone telling them that they don't need to go out of their way to help? It's a way of making the other person feel like they can relax, that their time and energy won't be demanded. But here's the catch: this phrase often comes with a hidden agenda that might not be so obvious at first. The true intent behind it is to make the recipient feel as though they owe something in return. And over time, this emotional debt can weigh heavily on the person hearing it. Let's think about an example. Picture a grandmother who regularly tells her grandchildren, "You don't have to do anything for me," whenever they offer to help her with chores or errands. On the surface, this sounds like the grandmother is simply being polite or modest. She's not asking for help, and she wants them to know that they don't need to go out of their way for her. But as time passes, the grandchildren might start to feel a subtle pressure building up. Maybe they don't want to help today, or maybe they have their own commitments, but the thought lingers in the back of their minds: "She said I don't have to, but I still feel like I should." The issue is that the phrase "you don't have to" sets up an emotional trap. It creates an illusion of freedom, making the person feel like they have a choice. However, underneath that surface level of independence, there's an unspoken expectation that they will help, even if they don't want to. This can lead to resentment or discomfort, as the recipient feels obligated to fulfill that implied duty without ever having been directly asked. They end up catering to the elder's needs out of a sense of guilt or responsibility rather than genuine desire. This type of manipulation can also prevent the person from setting boundaries. Imagine a scenario where a granddaughter is feeling overwhelmed with her own responsibilities, school, work, and personal life, but still finds herself running errands for her grandmother because of the guilt associated with hearing that phrase. She might tell herself that her grandmother doesn't explicitly ask for help, so she doesn't feel justified in saying no, even though she really needs to focus on her own life. According to a report from the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, manipulative behavior in familial relationships is often rooted in phrases like this, as they create a sense of duty without directly demanding anything. It's a way of weaving emotional obligation into a relationship under the guise of selflessness, making it harder for the person on the receiving end to break free from the cycle of giving without feeling guilty. Finally, there's the phrase, "I've lived through so much, I don't want to burden you." At first glance, this might appear as a humble admission of the struggles the speaker has faced. However, this phrase can be used as a way to elicit sympathy and prevent the person from speaking up about their own needs or feelings. The implication is that the speaker's past hardships should overshadow the current needs or challenges of the person they're speaking to. It makes the recipient feel like they can't voice their concerns without seeming inconsiderate or ungrateful. The psychological weight of this phrase can cause a person to suppress their emotions in favor of constantly tending to the perceived needs of the elder. When this dynamic is left unchecked, it can lead to emotional burnout and an unhealthy relationship dynamic. What makes these phrases so effective in manipulating behavior is that they often don't come across as overt demands or requests. They're wrapped in kindness and concern, which makes them incredibly hard to challenge. The person receiving the message may feel like they're being selfish or ungrateful if they don't comply with what's being implied. It's also difficult to confront these types of manipulations because they often rely on guilt, empathy, and love, the very emotions that are meant to bring people closer together. This emotional tug-of-war makes it hard to recognize that manipulation is happening. It's also worth noting that the impact of these phrases can be far-reaching. Over time, constant exposure to these subtle forms of manipulation can erode a person's sense of self-worth and independence. This is especially true when they are dealing with a family member who they view as someone who should be respected and cared for. As these manipulative tactics take root, the individual might begin to feel less confident in their decisions or even doubt their own feelings and desires. Case studies support this idea. In one study published by the American Psychological Association, participants who were exposed to manipulative behavior in family relationships reported higher levels of stress, lower levels of personal happiness, and a decreased sense of autonomy. This kind of emotional manipulation, while seemingly benign at first, can create long-term damage to the mental well-being of the person being manipulated. What's more concerning is that many of these individuals did not even realize they were being manipulated. They attributed their discomfort to their own inadequacies or felt guilty for not responding in the way that was expected of them. So, what can we do to break free from this cycle of manipulation? The first step is to recognize these phrases for what they are: tools of control. Being aware that the words being spoken might not always align with the speaker's true intentions is crucial in protecting your own mental and emotional health. From there, it's about setting boundaries. When someone you love or care about says something that feels manipulative, it's important to take a step back and assess whether their needs are overshadowing your own. While it's natural to want to help and support those who have been a part of our lives for so long, it's equally important to recognize that you deserve the space to make your own decisions and live your own life. The second step is communication. When you hear these phrases, it's okay to gently challenge them. Let the person know how their words are making you feel. In many cases, the person speaking may not even be aware of the emotional burden they're placing on you. Open dialogue can help them understand your perspective and, in turn, create a healthier dynamic between you both. For instance, if someone says, "I just want you to be happy," you might respond by acknowledging their concern but gently expressing that you are working on finding happiness in your own way, independent of their expectations. This sets a clear boundary and allows you to assert your own needs without feeling guilty. Additionally, it's important to realize that manipulation often stems from a place of insecurity. When older family members use these phrases, they may not be doing it intentionally to harm you. They might be expressing a fear of losing control or being abandoned. This doesn't justify their actions, but it can provide insight into why they might be using these phrases in the first place. By understanding the motivations behind their words, you can respond with empathy while still maintaining your own autonomy. At the end of the day, these phrases may seem kind, but they carry hidden weight. Recognizing their impact and taking steps to protect yourself is vital in maintaining healthy family relationships. You deserve the space to make decisions that align with your own happiness and well-being. By understanding the underlying intentions behind these kind phrases, you can navigate familial relationships in a way that honors both your needs and the love you have for your family.